What's up, everybody? It's Legal Tender. I'm back in the building. I'm back in the vault. Pulled out some notes to make a new video. As always, I want to start off by thanking everybody for supporting the channel. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really do appreciate it. If you're a fan of Newsmatics, if you're a fan of paper currency, if you're just getting into the hobby of Newsmatics, stay rocking with me, stay rocking with the channel. Every Tuesday is Legal Tender Tuesday, and I will be making a new episode every week speaking about something new, different, or interesting within the realm of Newsmatics. If you have any questions, comments, or input, put it down in the comment section. I read everything and I respond back as soon as possible. I love reading your comments, so keep that going. Throughout the video, if I say something that isn't 100% accurate or it's a little different from what you know, let me know via the comments. I will go back, hit the books, do my research, and make sure that I have the right information moving forward. All right, with that being said, let's get into today's episode. All right, so the notes that I pulled out from the vote today are these notes right here. This is the extent of my Federal Reserve banknote collection. So that's what we got. We got two notes. I want to get every denomination, but more to follow on that. All right, so like we always do, let's start by breaking down the bill. You can always tell the currency type up top. And we see that these notes are national currency. They have a unique brown Treasury seal in brown serial numbers. And this is the official title of these notes. These notes are called Federal Reserve banknotes. Now, I know up top it states national currency, but they are officially known as Federal Reserve banknotes. And with that, does two things. All right, so there is another currency type that has a striking resemblance to this note. And those notes are called national banknotes. And I'll speak about those in a minute. And another thing that I thought about is that with these national currency notes, there has never been a debate over the color of the Treasury seal. Like, these always have been labeled as brown Treasury seals. Now, if you think back to the Hawaii overprint note, it's a debate between if that color of the Treasury seal, if it's brown or maroon. But these national currency notes have never been in question. So I'm gonna start pushing the narrative. I'm gonna start pushing the narrative that these national banknotes are of a brown Treasury seal and the Hawaii overprint notes are maroon. So, like I said, there's another currency type that is just like this, and I'll speak about that in a second. But today we have Federal Reserve banknotes. So let's go. All right, so let's start off by stating what is a Federal Reserve banknote. A Federal Reserve banknote are banknotes that are legal tender in the United States. These notes were issued between the year 1915 and 1934, along with some other United States currency. And those other notes are United States notes, legal tender, or red seals. We got some silver certificates, blue seal. Now, this is the other currency I was speaking about. National currency note. And these are known as national city banknotes or just plain national banknotes. And they too have the distinct, unique brown Treasury seal as a color. And we got some Federal Reserve notes. Not Federal Reserve banknotes, but just Federal Reserve notes, and they are identified with the green Treasury seal. Now, another currency type that was printed during that time period between 1915 and 1934 are gold certificates. But I don't have a $5 gold certificate. Now, the reason I pulled these notes out is for denomination integrity. So I just pulled out all fives. So got a red 5, blue 5, brown 5, and a green 5. And once I get that $5 gold certificate, I'll add that to the collection as well, and I'll let you know. All right, so back to these notes right here, these Federal Reserve bank notes. All right, so these notes were specific in the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It had the same monetary value as any other currency type. So what I mean by that is that this $5 note it doesn't have a greater or lower value, a greater or lower value than this $5 note, or this $5 note, or this $5 note. $5 is $5, no matter how you cut it. So they all had the same monetary value, even though they are different currency types. And also, Federal Reserve banknotes are different from Federal Reserve notes in that they are backed by one of the 12 Federal Reserve banks rather than all collectively. All right, so this Federal Reserve banknote was issued from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago is the 7th Federal Reserve District. So this banknote right here was 100% endorsed by the Federal Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve District of Chicago. Now, this green seal Federal Reserve note was endorsed by the entirety of all 12 Federal Reserve banks and districts. So that's the only difference right there, the only distinction between, well, it's a little more to it, but that's like the overall main thing. This is 100% endorsed by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, as this note is endorsed by the Federal Reserve System, which is all 12 Federal Reserve banks. Now with this note right here, this note was endorsed by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Oh. All right, so now moving on. All right, so Federal Reserve banknotes were envisioned as replacements for national banknotes. They were backed in a similar way to national banknotes, using U.S. bonds that issued by Federal Reserve banks instead of by chartered national banks. Federal Reserve banknotes are no longer issued, and the only U.S. banknotes still in production since 1971 are Federal Reserve notes. All right, so going back, speaking about the differences between these two notes right here, these two currency types. As you see right here, now they are the same denomination, $200 bills, but this is a national city banknote or a national banknote, and this is a Federal Reserve banknote. Similarities are they both are national currency. And both notes have brown serial numbers and brown Treasury seals. Now, the thing that's different, and they are both endorsed by U.S. bonds. Now, with a national banknote, you see these numbers right here? This is the charter number. And the charter number is something that was bestowed upon the National City Bank of New York and this is bestowed upon this bank by the United States Treasury. Now, I got a previous episode speaking a little bit more in depth about national banknotes. So I ain't finna do a deep dive on national banknotes. If you want to know a little bit more about these types of notes, go back and check out that previous episode. But I'll speak like real quick about charter numbers. All right, see, these banks are like a smaller bank. So let's just call it a mom and pop bank. For this bank to get some legitimacy attached to its name, they went and applied. I'm gonna just say like they applied for application at the U.S. Treasury. The Treasury sent down some standards that this bank had to abide by, and once they did that, or felt like they met up to the standards of the U.S. Treasury, the U.S. Treasury sent down a small team. They checked out the bank, and if everything was on the up and up, this National City Bank was awarded a charter number. And the charter number pretty much gave this bank a legitimate stating that this is a legit real bank and it is endorsed and fully supported by the U.S. Treasury. Now, with a Federal Reserve Bank, they didn't have to do any of that because the Federal Reserve System came into play in 1913. So these was already banks that was legit and met the standard of the U.S. Treasury. So those are some of the differences. And like I said, these Federal Reserve banks were envisioned to replace these national city banks because it was a lot going on with these banks. Back in the days, it was like everyone was pushing out currency, small towns, different cities. It was just like a lot going on back then. Wildcat banking. And wildcat banking is when a bank forecloses and they still and they still issue out notes, but those notes are no longer valid by the issuing bank because that bank went bankrupt. But how would a bank in another town know that this bank is bankrupt? So you had wildcat banking that was going on and a whole lot of shenanigans. But with Federal Reserve banks, you didn't have to worry about that. Boy, that was a thing right there. I'm pretty sure I said that right. I'm tripping over my words right now, but stay with me. They're going to get better. And I'm not starting this episode over because I've been working on this episode, I don't know for how long. All right, so now even though national banknotes and Federal Reserve banknotes are similar in pretty much appearance, an easy way to identify them is national banknotes got these numbers right here. So whenever you see these numbers right here on the side, just think, all right, numbers start with N, national banknote. But a Federal Reserve banknote only has letters, no numbers. So that's how I was able to identify them with some clarity until I got like more immersed in knowing about national banknotes and Federal Reserve banknotes. These national banknotes came in every denomination, from 5s all the way up to 100. So it was real easy to get these notes confused with a Federal Reserve banknote. All right, moving on. All right, so what else we got? We have large size Federal Reserve banknotes. All right, now large size Federal Reserve banknotes were first issued in 1915 in denominations of 5, 10s, and 20s. Now, using the same design that shared elements with both national banknotes and Federal Reserve banknotes at that time. Then later on, they started issuing out 1s, 2s, and 50s. And these notes were issued 3 years later in 1918 as an emergency replacement for civil certificates, which were temporarily removed from circulation under the Pittman Act. All right, now back to small size Federal Reserve notes. Small size Federal Reserve banknotes. You got to put that banknote in there. If not, you'll just think it's a Federal Reserve note. And there's a difference between Federal Reserve notes and Federal Reserve banknotes. All right, so small size Federal Reserve banknotes were printed as an emergency issue in 1933 using the same paper stock as the 1929 national banknotes. And I'll speak about that in a second. They were printed in denominations of fives all the way up to 100. A national banknote has a line for the signature of the president of the national bank, but the small size Federal Reserve banknote printed a bar over the label for this line, since Federal Reserve banks had governors, not presidents. And there was also some changing to the wording as well. Now, the wording "or by like deposit of other securities" was added after the phrase. And I'm gonna show you what I'm talking about. All right, so going back to these two notes right here, 20, 20. National banknote, Federal Reserve banknote. All right, so let's start with the national banknote first off. All right, see, this the line that was added. Since this is a national city banknote that had cashiers, so there was a signature for the cashier and also a signature for the president. Now, for the Federal Reserve banknotes, and I just found this out too, that the Federal Reserve Board had governors. And I think it makes sense to have 12 governors, but for some odd reason, I'm thinking it's 7. I'll find out. You know what? Put that down in the comments if the Federal Reserve Board has 7 or 12 governors. Because I know it's 12 Federal Reserve banks, but for some odd reason, the number 7 is in my head. But I digress. Now, they used the exact same paper stock. So the printing was already on this note, was already on this paper. But since Federal Reserve banks don't have cashiers, they have deputy governors and assistant governors. So right there is the word governor, and they put a black bar over it. And over here, they had governors, not presidents. And you could kind of see the lettering president right there with that black bar over it. See right there. And on this side. Also, now this ties into the obligation of the note. Now the obligation on this national currency reads, secured by the United States bonds deposited with the Treasurer of the United States. All right, so the obligation is all the wording. And I got an episode speaking about the obligations as well. And it covers every currency type. So the wording on this the obligation on this national currency is national currency secured by the United States bonds deposited with the Treasurer of the United States of America. The National City Bank of New York, New York will pay to the bearer on demand X amount of dollars, $20. And right here, redeemable in lawful money of the United States at the United States Treasury or at the bank of issue. And the bank of issue is the National City Bank of New York. Right here, that wording was different because they added or like by deposit of other securities. And what I think they mean by that is that this camera's acting weird. And what I think they mean by that is that the other securities are other financial institutions. And I think that this note can be used at not only another Treasury or the bank of issue, but other Federal Reserve banks. That's what I think. If anybody got anything different, put that down in the comments. All right, so some of the features on these Federal Reserve banknotes are that the Treasury seal and written dollar amount can be found on the right side of the note along with the obligation inscribed over the seal. All right, so right here we have the Treasury seal, and that is written over the dollar amount of the note with the obligation stating that it is redeemable in lawful money at the United States Treasury or at the bank of issue. And also something that I found out is that, I'm gonna use these two 20s. Lighting kind of tough. This Treasury seal is smaller than this Treasury seal. If I had a good background, you'll be able to see it better. Let me try this. All right, so this Treasury seal is larger than this Treasury seal. All right, let's keep powering through because, man, this episode is rough. Okay, so Federal Reserve banknotes came in the following denominations: 5, 10s, 20, 50s, and $100 notes. And let's get into the fun facts. All right, fun fact number 1 is that Federal Reserve banknotes have an overprint like the experimental notes, the experimental RNS notes. And that is that National Banknote, Federal Reserve banknote. All right, so, or like by other securities was added. As already stated from the research that I did, that these notes are the exact same paper stock. So this note was made first with all the inscriptions, then they did an overprint. And I think it is, I want to say it's at least four additional overprints. Now, US currency is, the printing process is done 3 ways. They do the back first, because that consumes the most ink. Let that dry for 72 hours, and then they do the front. They put all the wording and the images on there. Let that chill for 72 hours. Then the third print run is when they put the Treasury seal and the serial number on there. Now with these notes, this was added, unlike up here, or by like deposit of other securities. And then since it's 12 Federal Reserve banks, this had to be added 12 different times along with the alpha code to identify the Federal Reserve Bank. So that's 1, 2, let's call that 2, and 3. They had to put that bar right though. So I believe these Federal Reserve banks have 3 to 4 additional overprints, just like the overprint of the Hawaii note and the experimental RNS note. All right, second fun fact is that the phrase "in God we trust" is not on the reverse of this currency type, because the phrase wasn't added into law until July 11th, 1955. Congress passed H.R. 619, which mandated "in God we trust" be included on all U.S. currency. "In God we trust" first appeared on paper money in 1957 on the $1 silver certificate. So now, like I said, these notes were printed from 1915 until 1934. So you will not find In God we trust on any national currency. Federal Reserve note or national bank note. All national currency, both types, are of series year 1929 with the signature of Jones and Woods. Already identified the fact that the Treasury seal is larger on the Federal Reserve banknote. And the Federal Reserve banknote, these notes bear two signatures of the issuing Federal Reserve Bank. And they are at the bottom. And those signatures can be of the governor, the assistant governor, no, the assistant deputy governor, the deputy governor, and the governor. And depending on the Federal Reserve Bank, it can be the comptroller as well, for a total of 4 signatures on this note. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I got a lot to work on my future episodes, but I've been working on this for a while. I just wanted to put it in there and send it out. All right. Like, comment, subscribe. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up. Tell a friend to like, comment, and subscribe. And boy, all right, that's all we got for this one. Federal Reserve banknotes. My God. It'll get better. All right. Till next time, keep it legal, keep it tender. Talk to you soon.